10 minutes. But for the sake of discipline, we will start at 6 o'clock itself. My name is Sanjay Banka. I'm the convener of India Finance Forum. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar. This webinar has been conducted on the topic of fintech and P2P lending. India Finance Forum is a association of finance professionals across India. It was formed in 2006, almost 14 years ago, and we have almost 3,500 to 4,000 members on India Finance Forum at LinkedIn. The group contains chartered accountants, cost accountant, company secretaries, CFAs, MBAs, and people who are into responsible positions. The objective of India Finance Forum was to bring together like-minded finance professionals and not only discuss on the accounting or taxation issue, but in course of time, create a think tank in India and develop a group which can give advice to government and to policymaker on the key financial policy of India. So we've been working on that line. So today's topic is fintech and P2P lending. We have a very renowned and very learned panel with us. Fintech, as you know, is basically delivery of financial services using technology. So any financial services, banking, insurance, borrowing, lending, credit card, mobile wallet, and so on. So now today we can see fintech in a full form, which has evolved over last 15 to 20 years. And India has taken a large stride in fintech. We have good examples which started from banking industry, insurance, credit card. And personally, I feel that Paytm has played a very important role in promoting fintech in India. It has taken the fintech to the villages, to the small areas, and even today, people who are not educated, they are very much conversant with fintech. So we require such promoters in India who continue to leverage fintech and take it to masses. That's how we can make India as a leader in fintech globally. And the offshoot of fintech is peer-to-peer lending, which is generally called P2P lending. People also call it crowd lending. There are various norms. So P2P lending has emerged in India in last 3 years. It is a regulated industry and RBI has given a guideline. So today we will discuss how P2P industry has taken its place and what is the importance of P2P industry for us as professionals, as a borrower and as lender in a larger ecosystem of fintech. So we would like to welcome our esteemed panelist. We have Mr. Manoj Agrawal, Mr. Surendra Jalan, Mr. Pramod Akramka, and Mr. Manish Baid. Let me introduce to you Mr. Manoj Agrawal first, because he's a fintech expert. Welcome, Mr. Manoj Agrawal. On this fintech seminar, we are sure that with your knowledge and experience, you would be learning a lot today, and you would share with our guests the intricacies of the fintech industry. Mr. Manoj Agrawal is a chartered accountant with 25 years of experience. He has worked in top companies like Ericsson, Wipro, Tech Mahindra, and he has also been instrumental in two substantial transactions with Flipkart and Yogi. He has been a sole advisor in a deal involving MobiKwik and Net UPS. Currently, he is a principal of a fintech advisory company called iAcquire LLP Consulting, where he advises most of the fintech company in their growth and expansion plan in their fintech strategy. We have Mr. Manish Baid, who will be taking us through and who will be moderating this event. Mr. Manish Baid, he's a plethora of qualifications. So welcome, Mr. Manish. He's a chartered accountant. He's a company secretary. He's a SEMA London. He's a CFA. Almost all the degrees he has acquired, it shows his wealth of knowledge and experience. He has worked in corporate sector as a CFO in Sukhum Industries, and he has also worked in senior roles in Anand Group. Last 12 years, he has set up his own independent practice so that he can serve a larger base instead of limiting himself to only one corporate sector. And he co-founded investment banking firm called Libgem Solutions, where he specializes in private equity, mergers and acquisitions, debt syndication, and international JV. Very good experience at such a young age. So we'll be benefited by his knowledge. Uh, and we have two young entrepreneurs. We can call them finpreneurs. That is Mr. Surendra Jalan and Mr. Pramod Akramka. Both have illustrious career, and the qualifications are extremely impressive. Rank holder, chartered accountant, company secretary, and cost accountant, both of them, and among top 3 and top 10, if I remember correctly. Mr. Surendra Jalan has been in banking sector, which clearly links to the P2P lending. He has an experience of almost 25 years in banking sector. He started his career in ICICI Banking Group and has risen to the top in investment banking, in treasury and funding. And then he joined Yes Bank as a founding member, and he has dealt with foreign investors and foreign banking for a long time, and then taken this plunge to implement the vision of government to promote fintech and P2P lending. And he has been joined by Mr. Pramod Akramka, who has been also a very rank holder, chartered accountant, illustrious career, almost 25 years of corporate experience. He has worked as Group CFO in Prism Cement, which is part of Rajan Raheja Group. He has worked in Piramal Group and also Vaibhav Group as a CFO. So with these two young entrepreneurs who have now industry experience and banking experience, they've taken a plunge into fintech and P2P lending. We have two experienced chartered accountants, Mr. Manish Bhatt and Mr. Manoj Agrawal. So they will take us through this entire journey of into fintech and P2P. I request you all to kindly put your phone on mute mode, and in case of any query, raise your hand. It will be our pleasure to take you through. So we'll start. I hand over the baton to Mr. Manish Bhatt to lead the discussion and moderate, and take as much query from the members so that they are benefited from this discussion today. So I welcome you all once again and requesting Mr. Manish Bhatt to kindly moderate the discussions on behalf of India Finance Forum.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. And I'm extremely grateful for you to give me this opportunity to moderate this particular session. And why I think this is important is because, considering the fact that, this is emerging as a very important segment in the economy in terms of their ability to service a new set of customers on the fintech side. So that's the broad reason why I think this is an interesting, and I think we have a very august panelist here, and of course the august gathering. And I will thank you everyone for joining in this session. To start this conversation, I think what I would like is to invite Manoj, who's a large advisory practice in the fintech space, to tell us a little bit more about fintech as a general thing, and of course the amount of buzz that fintech has generated due to the COVID scenario, and the way it is being talked about in as a catalyst for the Indian economic growth, and particularly as well in the individual investors, borrowers, and MSME segment using the fintech platform. So Manoj, if you can just share your views on these, in these changing times and the impact of fintech.
Yeah, thanks, Manish. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay, thanks. So it is a very interesting time. Very challenging. I would call it interesting time for anything which is digital, and fintech is converging itself from physical to digital for past many years. But post COVID, I think it will take a big leap, and most of us would prefer to deal contactless. Contactless means we don't have to touch each other. That's the way things will going to happen, particularly in fintech space, and fintech has a role to play. Okay, so I have one presentation which I carry. If you allow me, can I put it that and then share it with our participants?
Yeah, certainly. I think just give me 1 minute. I'll allow you to make the presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, please go ahead. I think now it should be possible.
Okay, sure. Uh, okay. Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So wait. Now, let me start with a little bit of definition of fintech. Fintech is having two words, financial and technology. So when a finance merge with technology, it's called fintech. Fintech impact every industry, every segment of our life, because payment or exchanging money is paramount to anything which is economic. So it comprises innovative companies. There are so many examples which are there of fintech, and I will talk about it. It is broadly any company using internet, mobile device, software technology, or cloud services in B2B and B2C segment is classified as a fintech company. Uh, so if you see evolution of fintech, it started sometime in 1982 when a company in
Manojji,
US.
Manojji, sorry, if you can kindly put it on the slide sharing mode. The
Uh,
left part of that can be hidden, so full slide will come.
oh,
नीचे presentation है ना sir, presentation mode. PowerPoint में sir. You can start sharing. No problem. You start the sharing the way you shared last time.
okay. Advanced sharing option. Wait, sorry.
Yeah, so you should scare the screen. Yeah, it's a little bit of technology nowadays. People are getting used to technology, but that's okay. If you share the screen, you'll see the PowerPoint showing up. You can select PowerPoint the way you selected just now, a little bit ago.
I'm doing share screen, advanced sharing option.
No, you don't have to do advanced sharing. You just put the green button, the green arrow.
Yeah, I'm doing it. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I can do it now.
Yeah.
Can you see?
Yes. So यहाँ पे सर एक button है नीचे. You can just make it a full screen. Then
Right, हाँ, ये वाली, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
People can see it more. Yeah, this is much better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for enabling me on this technology.
Yeah.
Okay, so it started with in 1982 in US. I'm not going in detail of each of the aspect, but started in 82 with stock broking, and stock broking, as you know, is something which is for some people it's very attractive. So PayPal, then Google Wallet, then Apple Pay, then the biggest thing which has happened in this area is $14 billion and financial IPO in 2018. Then lending companies have started to come in. They started to grow very big, both digital P2P lending and digital lending companies. And you see a lot of payment companies like Paytm, like PhonePe, like Google Pay, and you will see a WhatsApp Pay very soon in coming in a very big way, and it will sweep the payment industry in India. Let me talk about segment of fintech. So payment is one of the key part of fintech industry. So whenever exchange of money happens between two parties, whether it's B2B, B2C, there is a technology which is getting involved, and technology is making sure that payment happens and the experience is smooth. It happens immediately, efficiently, without any hassles. So there are so many companies in India and globally. They are working on making this as a very smooth experience. As you know, payment involved KYC. So even taking care of KYC and making it smooth is a big challenge. I'm personally involved in many payment companies, and I know what kind of challenges which a company has to take care before a customer can see seamless experiences. Lending. There are two types of lending. One is P2P lending, other is normal lending. Digital lending is the key. When I say digital lending, a customer can borrow money without any physical interface, or within 5 to 10 minutes is the total experience, including giving his KYC, credit score, disbursement, everything put together is 5 to 10 minutes. That's a digital lending experience, which many companies are now giving. P2P companies also giving that kind of experiences. Lending is happening both in B2B and B2C space, meaning MSME, SME are taking advantage of digital lending. As you know, digital capital markets, now days are gone when you have to open up account and wait for some time. So all digital account can open and you can start to trade in few minutes. That's a kind of fintech work which is going on. Personal financing, blockchain and crypto is something which is big. It will impact each one of us. Some of the central bank, like Chinese central bank, has started to issue eRMB. RMB is the currency name they use. So they have started to give salaries to their staff in eRMB. There is an inherent advantage of using blockchain technology to start a cryptocurrency by a central bank, because if central bank run that program, it is comfortable to the governments. So you will see something similar coming to India. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it's very interesting subject. Business solution, accounting, we used to see tally accounting, but there is a very, very advanced options which are predictable. They do everything on their own, connecting your bank account, connecting your customer, connecting your supplier, everyone is connected. Much better connectivity than probably some of the large ERP like SAP, Oracle or so. Insurances, there are very advanced insurance companies which are selling insurances digitally. Then other risk related activities, which most of us as a consumer, as an individual, are not concerned about, but businesses are very, very concerned about. Those are something which is taken care of by fintech companies. Now this chart talks about fintech industry as a whole. So if you see on the left hand side, this is volume, the right hand side is deal count, and you see dark blue color lines. These are the fintech transactions. If you see, fintech transactions are much higher than compared to other companies, e-commerce, health tech or ed tech. So you see this fintech is a favorite of investors. This slide is talking about the volume of investment which has happened in fintech in Q1 2020. Globally, $22.9 billion got invested in Q1 2020, January to March 2020, 335 deals, despite lockdown, despite COVID. This is a VC funded. In the same period, $7.2 billion, 319 deals which has happened in this period. These are some of the big investment which has happened in Q1. If you see the segment which has got most of the investments is payment. And payment is where every one of us get impacted as an individual, as an enterprise, or as a business. So there, most of the investors are putting focus on, but lending is also getting a lot of traction globally and also in India. So this is basically about fintech industry. So let me talk about the MSME or COVID part of it. The MSME traditionally in India is borrowing on an offline mode, which is very inefficient and time consuming. Whereas in this post-COVID area, contactless borrowing or lending is something which is very important. So some of the companies like P2P companies are working aggressively in this area and providing the platform where even MSME, SME can borrow digitally. I can talk about in detail about how it happens, what makes it happen, and so on and so forth. Even regulator like Reserve Bank of India allows eKYC or video KYC now, which is much more comfortable for contactless fintech experiences. Over to you.
Thanks, Manoj sir. And I think it was very well covered. And I think you nicely covered the impact of COVID as well on the fintech. So that was very useful conversation that you could cover. Let me bring our other panelists on this session, and Surinder Jalan, who is running P2P OML P2P. And Surinder, if you can just give us some input into how the entire P2P lending platform works, and how do we take advantage of the entire thing, and a little bit of insight into your experiences also would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Manish. So P2P in a simple world is like Amazon, where on Amazon you go and buy the stuff that you need, and there are sellers who are there who are displaying their stuff which they want to sell, and you select depending on your requirement, price point or the durability, brand, etc., etc. Similar thing is there with a P2P. It is a marketplace where there are borrowers, there are people who are in requirement of the funds, either for the business needs or for the personal needs, medical needs, travel needs, education needs, etc. So they come and register on our platform. We do KYC for the people who want to register on our platform, whether as a borrower or as a lender. And then after that, the P2P platform uses its algorithm, its methodologies to evaluate the borrower's requirement to see whether he is capable of servicing the loan that he is asking for, and what is the kind of risk profile. So everyone has their own algorithm. Some people might be using the bureau scores, and some might not be using them. But what I am saying is that basically there is a credit evaluation which happens on a P2P platform for each of the requirement for the loan. And if the P2P platform feels that it's a good borrower, there is he will be able to repay the loan in a given time frame. Then obviously they list that borrower on the platform, including the terms in terms of what is the rate that he is offering and what is the tenor for which he wants to take the loan. Similarly, anyone who wants to have an investment on the P2P platform, he registers himself as a lender. Again, the KYC is being done because the P2P platforms are RBI regulated entities. They have to follow the RBI guidelines in terms of the KYC and other various things. Once the KYC is done, the lender gets registered. He can see the borrowers which are there on the platform. He can choose the borrower out of the whatever the listed borrowers are there, depending on his risk appetite, depending on the period for which he has the surplus funds and the rate of interest that he desires to have. He can commit the loan amount. Once the loan gets funded, the amount gets transferred to the borrower. Now the entire money transfer happens through a escrow mechanism. So there is no involvement of the P2P in terms of, so it's a bankruptcy remote. Tomorrow the P2P platform is there or not there, the money remains safe. The P2P platform can never commingle the money which is the investor's money or the borrower's money for its own use. That is what the safety aspect RBI has put into the regulation as such. And the money gets transferred, and then on the due date of the EMI repayment, P2P collects the money through the NACH or the checks or through the online payment, etc. And that money gets again transferred to the lender. The lender can then use that money for subsequent investment, or maybe for new investment into the P2P platform, or he can withdraw that money for his own use, etc. So that is how in a simple word, that is how the platform works. That is how the P2P model works. And since I had been an experience of banking for past 25 years before I started this, and Pramod being a finance person, as such being a CFO for large companies, we thought this is a good opportunity for creating a value for all the stakeholders, whether it's a borrower, for the lender, and it will also help us in serving the social cause of meeting the credit requirement of the people, because you know that in India is a vast country, and in spite of all the efforts by the government and the RBI, the existing infrastructure, the lending institutions are not able to meet the requirement which is there, and there is a room for many people who can come and serve. And the P2P, I think, is the being a digital platform, is in a better position to reach out to the people who are not able to get the loan from the existing system as such.
Very interesting. I think, and while you were mentioning about the RBI regulations also. So I'll take this question to Pramod on this. That RBI has been a very good regulator, and RBI has also issued a regulatory framework for the NBFC P2P also. So almost all the NBFC P2P are under the regulation of RBI, and it will be good to know a little bit more about what are the kind of guidelines that RBI has issued. And also, I think in the recent past, they have also amended some of these guidelines. So Pramod, if you can just give us some overview of these amendments as well.
Thanks, Manish. RBI has decided to come out with the guidelines in the early stage of peer-to-peer lending platform. And we are very thankful to RBI from the industry side for their supportive guidelines. See, RBI has a dual role. RBI has a role to see that the industry, they think they need to control, grow meaningfully. At the same time, the participant of the industry players like borrowers, lenders, and others should also be protected. So considering this, generally regulator doesn't come in the early stage of the industry growth, but RBI, seeing the global peer-to-peer lending platform development in the other countries like US, UK, Singapore, Indonesia, and Malaysia, and China, they have felt the need of providing a guidelines in India so that the industry can grow meaningfully and in a faster track mode. At the same time, the lenders and borrowers be protected. If you see that RBI has a dual role, and they were quite considerate in considering the requirement of the industry in terms of changing in the guidelines. There are only basically 3 conditions which RBI has placed in the guidelines. One is the escrow mechanism. As Surinder said, all funding between the lender and borrower and lender vice versa has to move through the escrow mechanism, where the escrow account is with the bank, and the escrow accounts are being managed and controlled by the escrow trustee. Platform has no direct control on the escrow accounts, and it ensures that the movement of the money between lender and borrower and vice versa happens for the purpose it has been given and not for any other purpose. Second, the loans to be transacted on the lending platform as on the day is only unsecured because the ticket size is smaller. Third is that the limit placed on the borrower and lender, the total limit for the borrower to avail the loan across all the lending platform in India is 10 lakh rupees. If you see the average ticket size of the unsecured loan, it is something around 5.5 lakh rupees. So considering that, the 10 lakh rupees limit is quite good enough. For the borrower, earlier the limit was 10 lakh rupees. For the lender, earlier the limit was 10 lakh rupees. Now the lender can place 50 lakh rupees per PAN card on the lending platforms across India. If they have 5 members in the house, they can place 5 into 50 lakhs, that is 2 crore 50 lakhs. Herein, wherein the RBI has changed the guidelines, RBI earlier has placed a restriction of 10 lakh rupees per lender, which after realizing the fast track growth need of the industry and the industry association representation, they changed 10 lakh rupees to 50 lakh rupees. We are seeing that RBI is very receptive and proactive and supportive in terms of the requirement to see the industry growth. And for that, we are very thankful to RBI.
Okay. So that's very useful input as well, because the credibility of any platform would be very high if it is highly regulated. And in India, RBI has done a fantastic job of regulation, irrespective of the current scenario that we are facing. In India, it has been far more better regulation over the years that we have seen. RBI has always stepped in to protect the interests of the lenders and deposit holder. So when RBI has been concerned, and they have done a good job. While we are at it, Surinder, maybe if you can give us some input in the fact that P2P ultimately competes with banks and NBFCs as a both for borrowing as well as lending. So, for example, a depositor would have an option to put it in a bank or give it on a P2P platform for onward lending. Similarly, he has an option to give it to NBFC. So, how does this P2P platform coexist with banks and NBFC, as well as how will they compete, to provide benefits to both the customers, which is lenders as well as borrowers in our case in P2P platforms?
I will take this question in two parts. One is that on the borrower side, and also then secondly on the lender side. Now, I will say that the P2P platform, though in some areas might compete with the other lending institutions, but it's more of a platform, or it's more of an institution which will coexist with all the other platforms. So in India, we have banks, we have NBFCs, we have rural RRBs, we have cooperative banks. In spite of all these also, and we still have huge unmet credit demand for both at the personal front and at the business level also, in terms of MSME. And off and on, we have lots of studies which get done, and we find that even most of the people are still resorting to the informal channels for their credit requirements. So I think there is a huge scope, and no one has to eat into others' share as such to grow the business. Now, yes, in some part geographies or some kind of products, there could be some competition between the various institutions which is there, and the person who is the most efficient in that product in terms of the cost as well as in terms of the delivery will obviously get more customer as such. But I think by and large, I feel that there is a scope for maybe even multiple number of more players in the Indian market, where as far as the demand for the credit is concerned, unmet demand for the credit is concerned. Now, coming to the part of lender acquisition, now I think that P2P is in a very unique position, because they are not competing with any of the traditional investment product which is there, whether it is bank FD or it is a equity market product or it is a mutual fund product. Why I am saying that is that for today, none of the investor has the option to invest into a retail loan. You can invest into equity directly, or you can invest into equity through mutual fund. You can invest into the bank FD, which is very safe, but the returns are not commensurate as such. Today, for example, you will hardly get around 6% for FD in a bank for a 1 year kind of a thing. When you invest into fixed income product, largely through the mutual fund is the primarily the option, apart from the maybe small amount that you can put into the post office and PPF, etc. When you put into the mutual fund, the fixed income product, again, you are taking the exposure on the corporate credit, because the mutual fund in turn invests into the bonds, debentures, or the CPs of the corporate. But there is no way that you can invest into a retail loan, which is by far the safest asset class as such. Obviously, if we have to exclude the current COVID scenario, which is impacting everyone, whether the corporates or whether the individuals, whether the retail, SME, everyone is getting impacted. But otherwise, by and large, the retail asset class is a safest asset class, and it gives you a better return also. For example, various on a P2P platform, on an average, you might get a return between say 15% to 20-25%. depending on the risk appetite that you are having, and depending on the kind of borrowers you choose to give loan. For example, in our own platform, the average return the lender gets is somewhere between 15 to 18%. That is after the accounting for the bad debts or the delinquencies which are there on the platform. We have around 22-23% is the average rate on which the loans get loan to the borrowers. But after accounting for the delinquency, maybe 15-16%. So I think on the lender side, we are not competing with anyone. We are offering a asset class which is not there in the market, which is not offered by the market, anyone in the market as such. So I think there is no competition with the banks and the NBFCs or mutual funds. We are not trying to compete there.
Fully understand that. So let me bring Manoj into this now. And Manoj, what are the trends that you are seeing in the fintech industry, and particularly in the current environment that we are seeing in terms of, we have this COVID, we have this lockdown, 4 lockdowns, and now we are unlocking. So where do you see this, fintech, the importance of fintech in this environment?
Okay, thanks. I think this is a very interesting, important question, both from government and public at large. So basically, COVID is accelerator to digitization of anything and everything in India, or maybe globally. In the post-COVID-19 future, sanitization and hygiene will comprise the priority for every individual. People can use new age financial services at the minimum risk of contracting the virus. So if you see there are QR codes, you scan the QR codes, there is no contact. You can just make the payment and done with it. In other words, fintech services of the future will be tasked with transforming the financial landscape to make it safer, beside more efficient, accessible, and affordable. So like digital loan, for example, P2P loan. If you see normal, if you do an offline loan, the cost of processing a loan is between 4 to 6%, depending on size and all. Whereas in digital, it is less than 1%. Similarly, payments, if you use a credit card, there is an MDR of 2.5%. Whereas in UPI, it is negligible. So in post-COVID area, so anything which is contactless, efficient, can grow at mass scale, will be the thing to be used, or will be used.
Understand. Thanks for this input, Manoj, and I sincerely appreciate it. Let me come back to Pramod, and there is a general feeling, Pramod, that these fintech loans are given to people who are low credit score, and therefore they're higher risky. So how do you, as a fintech, ensure that investors' money is protected, it's well invested, and maybe if I can know a little bit about, or the entire team would like to know that how the fintech is working to ensure availability of money to the borrower, and at the same time protection of the lender, so that they get a decent return and the capital is protected. So if you can just give an overview of that.
Aman is very interesting point. I think people thinking about fintech giving loan to the low credit score is a myth. Basically, lending is a business of risk, and one of the objective fintech is servicing is financial inclusion. So today, because of lack of availability of banks and NBFC on all nook and corners, or their ability to serve them at the lowest cost, all people are not getting a loan, or they are not getting benefit to come into the mainstream with the loans availability and doing the business or taking care of their personal loan. So when we talk about the fintech companies or P2P lending platforms giving loan to the people who are new to the credit, yes, that is there. But new to the credit doesn't mean the lower credit quality borrower. For that reason, all the fintech has developed their own programs, credit algorithms, and policies through which the borrower need to go through in order to qualify. In case of P2P lending platform, see, the name itself suggests that it's a lending platform. And when it is a lending platform, the basic objective is to ensure that the lender's money get protected and by investing or lending to the good quality rightful borrower, to generate better risk adjusted returns to the lender, so that they are happy and they find it as a better alternate investment avenues compared to other conventional avenues. P2P platforms, or for that reason any of the fintech companies today, they have developed their own proprietary algorithm. In our case, we have developed the proprietary algorithm with the help of Griff Highmark, and we have tested it on few million data to assure and to in a way ensure that the credit risk remain within the given parameter. We also draw down the bureau score that give us and help us to understand the past behavior of the borrower. We do the financial analysis, detailed financial analysis of the borrower, and cash flow analysis. In our case, we do the lending on the basis of likely cash flow of the borrowers, because finally he pay the EMI out of the cash flow. Unlike other conventional lenders, wherein they are doing on the surrogated basis of lending and others, wherein the key parameters of sales and others are more important. In our case, we give much more weightage on the ability to pay, that is the cash flow. We do the reference check, physical verification of the borrowers, their employment verifications. All these help us to find out the good quality of borrowers. Borrower not so good quality get out from these selection criteria. Once the loan is given, since loaning is a risk business of risk, we have our collections and recovery mechanism, which is on time, and we have our artificial intelligence based algorithm which tell us which customers need extra care in order to collect the money. If that doesn't happen, then we have the recovery agents which are RBI compliant, and then there's a legal route. Anyway, we take the NACH and ENACH, wherein, and the check PDCs also, which help us to take the borrower to court under section 138, which is a criminal offense to dishonor the check. But if I go by our own personal experience last 2-3 years, we are finding that more than 95 to 98% of the borrowers are paying their loan in time, or in an extended time periods. 2-3% of difficult borrowers, that's the industry terms actually.
Interesting. Very interesting. I think very useful, input. So Surinder, this is an interesting question that I want to know, because currently we all see that interest rates are falling. Government wants them to go down further. The stock market is extremely volatile. Real estate pricing is no more a attractive asset class. Gold has peaked its price, it seems. How does, in this environment, fintech was able to create value for, let's say, somebody who's participating as a lender on your platform?
Yeah, as I have said earlier also, this is a new kind of asset class which was not available earlier as such, because there were no means to participate into the retail loans, except maybe informally people would have lent to their friends and families or some known person, etc. But that was more because I know you, I can do that. But today it is being offered as a asset class. So sitting in, say, Calcutta, you can invest into a loan which is in a borrower which is in a Cochin asset, and you have all the information about him. So you can take a very informed decision rather than just as a friend kind of. So you have when we list a borrower, as Pramod has said, we do a lot of investigation and due diligence and credit check on that person. So when we list a borrower, we tell you about his income, his past behavior, his CIBIL score, his repayment capabilities, whether the guarantor is there, and so you take an informed decision on that. So I will not say that you should come out of the equity, or you should come out of the bank FD, or you should come out. I will say that it is a new asset class, and you should allocate certain amount of your investment into this asset class also. So it's not going to substitute the FD, or it's not going to substitute a equity market, or it's not going to substitute a mutual fund, etc. it's a new class. You can't compare it with, depending on your risk appetite, your allocation could be different. You can be, depending on the risk that you want to take, you can allocate high or low in this asset class. But I think this is a new emerging asset class where everyone should participate into that. Just like you are putting some money in insurance or some money in mutual fund and some money in bank fixed deposit, you have to have this asset class also in your portfolio. And as I have mentioned, the return reward currently is in favor as such. Because as I mentioned, that around 15 to 18% is the return that you are getting on this platform currently. And the various platforms offer different kind of products. So there are people who can invest for a 3 month also or 1 month also, where you get a return of around say 8 to 10%, 11%, which is much better than a liquid fund or which short-term debt fund return. You can position your requirement and invest into a particular P2P accordingly.
Understand. That's very interesting. We've heard all this while a lot about. I think this platform is also about borrowers, and Pramod, if you can just give us some insight into what are the benefits that a borrower typically can expect in this P2P platform, why they would keep coming to you and not go to maybe, let's say, a bank or an NBFC for borrowing. So why it is so important for a borrower, particularly the MSME and the individuals, what are the challenges that they face and the reason why they feel more comfortable on the P2P platform?
So Manish, the lending happen only when there is a borrower. So borrower is very important for the platform and for the transaction to get consummated. Now, why the lenders? Why the borrowers will come to the platform and borrow? Let's say there are several advantages. One advantage is the cost effectiveness. If you say typical bank or typical NBFC, conventional bankers, they have a huge amount of selling and administrative cost ranging between 3 to 5%. Then they have CRR, SLR compliance cost. Then they have the priority sector lending cost. All this together comes to something around 6 to 8%. On the lending platform, as Manoj pointed in during his discussion, the lending platform cost in a fully evolved model will be something around 1.5%. So saving up something around 4.5% is need to be distributed between the lender, borrower, and the platform. Assuming if the platform will charge 1%, the rest of the money will be going to the lenders and borrowers. So the cost of borrowing for the borrower, same set of borrower vis-a-vis the bankers will be significantly lower. Second is the transparent. The entire transaction is transparent. It is online. Everything is recorded and visible on the black and white on the platform. It is unsecured. So no security required. If you go to the other conventional lenders, first of all, they will ask the security. When I'm talking about unsecured, I'm not talking about the quality in terms of the lending. That is not compromised on either of the platform, whether conventional or on this platform. Then the ease of making an application. Today, in case of a fintech companies or peer-to-peer lending platform, you can make your application any point of time, even in the midnight. If you need some money, just go and log into the platforms and make your application. If you are already registered customer, it will not take more than 2 to 3 minutes to make an application, and 24 hours to 48 hours, you can expect your money in the bank, which is unheard in the conventional banking in general. Minimal paper, no documentation. You don't have to go and meet any person. So there is no cost, and KYC also is nowadays video KYC, and it's on time online KYC is happening. In terms of repayment also, it is through the eNACH, wherein you don't have to do any effort. You just signed one paper through the digital mode, and the money will be debited from your account time to time as per the agreement. So effectively, borrower is getting the money at his convenience, without having any interaction with the lenders, and at the much more competitive cost without having major hassles. So there are a lot of reasons for a borrowers to come to the new age fintech companies and borrow from them.
Interesting. So Manoj, let me get a little outside perspective, because an independent perspective from outside. How do you see this changing of experience for the investor and borrower on the P2P platform in coming time? What are the important things that you think are going to benefit this segment, or what this segment needs to do to improve the experience of the borrower as well as the lender?
Thanks, Manish. I think this is very important. See, this is a time of user experience. Okay, so if you get a good user experience of doing a transaction, then you will do it again and again. If user experience is bad, then obviously you will not going to do that transaction or deal with the entity. So gone are the times when you have to go to a bank and or a NBFC, offline NBFC, and ask for a loan. And after a few days of collecting information, they say, no, we can't give you loan. So that is not going to happen. And same is with investor in. So everyone wants to diversify the risk. Everyone wants to have a best-in-class user experience with best-in-class rates or cost or revenue. So anyone who would provide that opportunity will be winner. So let me give you an example. I don't know how many of us have experienced WhatsApp Pay. If you try WhatsApp Pay, I personally believe it will going to change the way payments happen in India versus Paytm Pay or PhonePe Pay or even NEFT RTGS, which we do online on a phone or website. So any of convenience is and transparency is something which is of paramount importance both to borrower and investor, and that's where, and like earlier I said, contactless. It has to be contactless, then it will be successful. That's what my view is.
Very interesting, very interesting. Surendra, you also, as a running this company, OML P2P, you must be facing this, conflicting objectives, because you have to create value for the borrower and also that lenders get at a reasonable price. And obviously there are contradictions between the two of them. So how do you manage and balance these two conflicting objectives? Surinder, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry for that. Manish, I don't think that it is a conflicting objective. Now we have to understand that whoever is going to lend to a particular borrower has to get the commensurate return. Now, as we said, we classify our borrower into various categories depending on his risk profile, and that is how the rate of interest gets determined, which on our platform can be as low as 11% to as high as 30% also. But obviously, the risk reward or the what we call is the default expectation from those two borrowers are also different. So if you create a pool of say 100 borrowers of 11% rate, you might experience a default rate of say for example 1% or 0.5%. When you create a pool of 100 borrowers of say 30% interest rate, maybe you might experience a default rate of 6%, 8% kind of a thing, etc. So pricing has to be in terms with the what is the risk that you are envisaging in a particular loan asset. Now coming back to whether there is a conflict. Now how do we operate then? If we are saying that we are going to give a 30% return, and at the same time we are saying that the borrower is still getting a lower rate of interest on our platform. So as Pramod has also earlier mentioned, that there are lots of costs associated when you borrow from a bank or a NBFC asset. So for example, Pramod has said there is a CRR cost, there is a SLR cost, there is a priority sector cost, and on top of that there is a capital cost, because you need to maintain a capital adequacy. For a bank it is a 10%. For 100 rupees loan you need to have a 10 rupees as a capital. For a NBFC for 100 rupees loan you need to have 15 rupees as a capital. So there is a cost associated which is there. Plus, as most of them are not fully digital, there is a operating cost also which is associated. All in all this cost comes to around 6 to 8% which is there. Now, as a P2P platform, we don't have those associated to. We are not SLR, CRR, etc., because we are not taking deposit. The money which comes to us from a lender remains into a separate escrow account. It's not in our balance sheet. We can't touch that money. So we are not subjected to do all those regulations by RBI. Now, this cost of 600 pips can be divided between the platform, the lender, and the borrower, and everyone can get. So the lender, which the borrower who can get a loan from, say, example, from a bank at 13%, can get a loan from P2P platform at 11%. So it is a win-win situation for him. The lender, the borrower who can get a loan from a bank at say 24%, might as well get a loan from our platform, say 22% or 21%. Still is a win-win for him. At the same time, a lender who is giving the deposit to a bank at 6%, he is funding the same borrower, which a bank is funding at 13%. He is now funding the same borrower at 11%. So he is also getting his pound of less, and the remaining can come to the platform, which is providing the service to both the borrower and the lender, doing all the collection activity. So the lender don't have any operational cost. All the operational activity on behalf of the lender is being done by the platform. So the lender keeps the platform keeps some margin for itself. So I think it's a win-win situation. There is no conflict here as such.
Understand. So it's a management of conflict basically, and it's good. I think we are able to manage the conflict well. Or let's say, for example, manage multiple objectives and create a win-win situation. So that's a very interesting way of doing it. Pramod, if you can, these fintech companies lend typically to small businesses or maybe individuals, and there are challenges with that lending because it's highly dependent on the income earning of one individual person, whereas in a corporate structure, maybe it's an organization that you're lending to. Considering that, how do you cover for some unfortunate unseen event, like let's say, for example, an accident or a job loss or similar thing that could happen to a person to a borrower? So if you can just know a little bit more about this.
So Manish, we are in the business of loaning, and this is also known as the business of risk. So risk mitigation, risk assessment is the two important part for us, not only, and since the lending is being done by the lender, we have to take care of their business risk of loaning. So what we do, there are two types of risk associated in a loan. One is that credit risk, another is the event risk. Credit risk is the risk in terms of the borrower not paying or their behavioral or maybe default, which we take care through our credit processes, which we discussed in detail in our earlier question. So the second is event risk. Event risk is, for God forbid, but if because of any unfortunate event, say if the borrower dies or borrower become incapacitated, then what happened that we have taken the insurance from HDFC Life, as well as we have taken the insurance from the Shriram Insurance. So anything happening to the borrower, we get the money from the insurance company, and that money is being shared with the borrower, with the lender for their outstanding amount of lending. Balance money, whatever remains, that we give it to the borrower. So it's a win-win situation. While we are managing the interest of the lender, we are making it win-win situation both for the borrower and lender. And we also take the guarantor wherever we think that the guarantor is required. We take the guarantor also as a part of our business loaning, which help us to recover the money from the guarantor in case any eventuality happen with the borrower.
Thanks, Pramod, for that insight. And I now have one question which I want to pose to all three of you, and hear your opinion about the overall industry. And this is my last question for the evening. So there is a lot of discussion on this industry growing very fast, and some people are talking about 50,000 crore industry in 3 to 4 years. Would like to hear your perspective on where do you see this industry of P2P growing, and in terms of the market size and future outlook. So maybe we can start with Surinder first, and then Manoj, and then we can come to Pramod. Is that okay? Surinder?
Yeah, see, as I said, we are merely a platform which is connecting the borrower and the lender. And as I have said earlier, also there is a huge unmet demand for the credit which is yet to be fulfilled by the formal institutions which are in existence for so many years as well. So I see lots of value addition, and there is a huge growth which can happen, and particularly this COVID thing, which will perforce everyone to move into the digital assets. So I think when we were operating pre-COVID, many of the borrowers still used to, or the lenders still used to insist on, no, they want to give the check or they want to fill up the form, etc. I think the COVID is in that way is a blessing, that it will accelerate the digital journey in our country, and that will help hugely to the digital platforms like the P2P platforms.
Yeah. So my view is, see, look at unmet demand of borrowers, and obviously it is huge, humongous numbers. Look at the other side of fixed deposit rates of State Bank of India, saving bank rates, and reverse repo amount, which goes into Reserve Bank of India every day at 2.5% or whatever it is, reverse repo rate. So what I was seeing is around 7 to 9 lakh crore, which goes into reverse repo. So banks are not able to lend. There is an unmet demand of borrowers. So somewhere there is a disconnect between borrower and the lender. And platform like P2P is a truly democratic platform, which allows on one side the lender, on the other side the borrowers, and match is happening. Now the only thing is, I think which is probably required is little more awareness among lender, and little more awareness about borrowers that this is the option available and they can come here and then meet or fulfill their demands or requirements, both borrower and lender. So I think there is humongous opportunity for, and the amount of 50,000 crore or 1 lakh crore is just a number. I think in next few years it will be pick up in India. I mean, my favorite example is China because it has evolved in a big way. So some of the P2P platform, they were doing like 2,25,000 loan per day. Okay, that P2P platform, 2,25,000 loan per day, and obviously whatever the average amount is a huge amount. So something similar can happen in India in next few years in digital P2P lending industry. That's my view.
Pramod?
So Manoj has already taken it elaborately. Only one point from my side. Awareness is what P2P industries or fintech make widespread. If you see NBFC of earlier times, or if you see payment bank, or if you see wallet industries, all of them has grown, or for that reason, e-commerce, Flipkart and Amazon, they all have grown because of widespread awareness about the industry and the protections available in the industries. In this case also, the same thing is required, and figure 50,000 or 1 lakh crores, and I think it's a number. Once awareness happens, it can be multifold also. And for that, I would like to thank you and Sanjay Banka for taking an extra effort to make the people aware about peer-to-peer lending platform industry, and also about the fintech advantage, which anyway is going to help the Indian economy and the Indian customers.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your input on this important subject. And I believe that this industry will grow. And that is one of the reasons why this program has been organized by the India Finance Forum. And I sincerely appreciate them. And for the moment, I think as far as the panel discussion is concerned, I think we are done. Sanjay, I think there are some questions that you want to take for the participating in this.
Thank you, Manish, for leading this this panel and getting the details from the panel so nicely with all your insights. So before we move on to the Q&A sessions, I want to take your expert view as an investment banker. So you are having a much larger perspective when you deal with the investors, with and the private equity and the VC firms. You'd like to understand what is the view of the private equity or the VC or the foreign investors, how much funding the sector is likely to receive from your perspective, and what more the industry needs to do.
So I think there are two things in the P2P segment that is happening as far as the investors are concerned. I think there is some level of reluctance because they are concerned because there are too many moving parts, but because there are an aggregation on the borrower side and then an aggregation on the lender side, that is both of them are required, and therefore there are some concerns on that. But I believe that NBFC P2P, if the moment it gets a little bit of its tentacles inside the which is getting in the last 2 years, there's a lot of strength that the industry is getting, then the investors will pump in a lot of money to scale this up, because this business, there's no doubt about it, there are many reasons for this industry to do well. A simple reason is that there is an unsatisfied demand. We have seen this today. We have heard this from people who are in this business. So I believe that with this unsatisfied demand, there is an opportunity for investors to consolidate and make money out of this. So I mean, investors at the end of the day come here because they want to make their money, and I believe that this is going to make money. So private equity investors, there is already a lot of money that has come into this segment. I think the more money will come into this segment, certainly.
Right. So, which means that, as Mr. Surinder was saying, that the P2P industry will coexist. They will not take anybody's wallet share, and so we can look at the growth in the media. We are looking at different numbers. People are quoting a number of $2 billion to $10 billion. So let's say 70,000 crore. That number, the P2P industry is likely to reach, if not by 2025, by 2026, right? Next 5-6 years, we can look at the growth. Good. So thank you, Manish. We have got quite a good number of queries from our participants, and including a few query on the YouTube live. And that is a very interesting query, which I will like to take up and which will make us more aware. One query was on YouTube from Mr. Ravi Shankar, that as you have referred that you have got an algorithm for the credit evaluation of the customer. Is there a machine learning module as well when you are doing the credit evaluation of your customers?
Surinder, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, so we do use some sort of machine learning, but as you must be knowing that for the machine learning will work more accurately only when you have a large number of database. Since as we have mentioned that the industry is new, so to the extent we can use those machine learning, we are using that, but it has to fully benefit from the AI and ML. I think we need to wait for some more time for the right amount of data to be there, so that we can say that yes, it is working very well.
Okay. One more query was from Mr. Pradeep Madhavadia. I think he is also on Zoom as well. He has a specific query. I think this has been addressed by you as well. What is the range of the lending rate and borrowing rate? If you can re-emphasize once again, because that is the direct interest for the lender and borrower, the maximum, minimum range, and so on, for the borrowing and lending both.
See, on a different P2P platform, the rates of interest will vary because the products can also vary on a platform to platform. As I have mentioned, the rate of interest will depend on 3-4 factors. So I am just talking about the broader factors, which are like what is the credit profile of the person who is taking a loan, what is the tenor of the loan, and what is the kind of, so it's a, say for example, what is the past history that he has, or it's a new to credit kind of a thing. So broadly, depending on that, the rate of interest will vary. So the rate of interest could be somewhere between say 8% to, it can vary up to say 40-42% also, depending on the profile. As each of the risks will have a different kind of default rate, and you have to take care of those default rate while you are charging the interest to a particular borrower.
But this is purely on the lender. It is not the platform. The lender himself decides which risk category he want to lend, and then accordingly he get the return.
Sanjay,
No,
I take
he
this-
did. Yeah. Pramod,
Sanjay, I take this question. What Surinder talked about in general, what is happening in fintech industry. If we apply to our platform, which can give a better idea to the viewers, we are currently charging something around 10.9% to 30%, depending upon the quality and likely credit risk involvement in the borrowers. Does that reply to your question?
No, my query was, it is purely the lender decides, right?
Okay.
Which risk category you want to lend, right?
See, there are two parts of this. Practically, lender will decide which borrower he want to lend, depending upon his own risk appetite and his requirement of money in hand. So,
Right.
because we are listing from few days to 3 years, maximum 3 years is allowed. So up to 3 years loan is being listed on the platform. Somebody who has a money for say 12 months, he will like to put only for 12 months, he will select that type of borrower only. And then again, what is the risk appetite? Somebody looking for higher risk, higher return, he will look for a different borrowers. But they can invest into only those borrowers which has been selected by the platforms.
Okay.
So
That's
first
okay.
the borrower comes and we select it, and only when the platform certify that this is a lendable or fit borrower to be placed on the e-commerce site, then
Right.
only it is placed, and out of that lender choose of their selections.
Good. So one query was from Anita Sheikh. She wanted to know that is there, what is the requirement? What are the requirement to become a channel partner? So maybe you can connect with her.
We will
separately.
connect her separately, because that may not be a common question for all the participants.
Correct. Now, Manish Singh has asked 2-3 questions, and very important is that about the TDS. So when the lender earns the interest, how the TDS is deducted?
So see, TDS is deducted as per the Income Tax Act. So wherever TDS is applicable, it will be deducted. But incidentally, on our platform, most of the lendings are happening to unsecured MSME lenders, as well as the individual investors. The individual investors are not supposed to deduct the TDS. We have not come across cases wherein the TDS has been deducted. So by and large, I can say TDS generally are not deducted, but legally wherever IT Act required to deduct the TDS, borrower will definitely deduct the TDS.
And the query was also on the period of what is the minimum and the maximum period of what is the maximum and minimum tenor which a lender can look at, and minimum amount.
So Surinder?
See, as per the regulations, the lending which can happen on a P2P platform can be up to 36 months. So it can vary from a 1 day to 36 months. And in terms of the amount, what the regulation states is that a particular lender can invest up to 50 lakh rupees across various P2P platforms. And in particular loan, a lender can invest up to maximum of 50,000 rupees. The minimum is again decided by each of the platforms. So for example, on our platform, we allow the lender to invest as little as 2,000 rupees also in a particular loan.
So from 2,000 rupees to 50 lakh rupee, right?
Yes.
Right. And there was one query, I think this query may not be relevant. It is saying that if an MSME in electricity, telecom or infrastructure sector, they want to borrow 1 crore rupees, what is the requirement? So
anyone can borrow from the P2P platform. There is no restriction in terms of who can borrow. The only restriction which is there in terms of regulations is that maximum borrowing on the platform can be up to 10 lakh rupees. So if it's an infrastructure company or it's he can borrow up to 10 lakh rupees, not up to 1 crore rupees.
So practically, they will not be borrowing at this place.
Correct. Now there are quite a few queries on the rate of bad loan from Mr. Manish Agrawal, Mr. Pratik, Mr. Kejriwal as well. So they want to know what is the percentage of collection how much people have applied for moratorium and so on. If you can take up those queries from industry perspective.
Okay, so I can't generalize what will be the bad loans on a platform, because as I said, it will differ from the product to product and the risk profile to risk profile. If as I said, it's the lender who is choosing the borrower. So if you have invested all into a, as we call it, the P1 category, which is the best category, where the rate of interest can be somewhere 11% to 13-14%. If you have invested in all that category, your default rate should not be more than 1% or so. But if you have chosen all the loans which are into 30% category, maybe your default rate could be 6-8% kind of a thing. So it's not fair to say what is the default rate as such. It will depend on the product and the risk profile that you have chosen on particular as such. What was the second thing you said?
One is the percentage of borrowers who have opted for moratorium.
Okay. Now see, once this moratorium thing has been announced by RBI, we got in touch with them and got that clarification that moratorium is not applicable to the P2P platforms as such. So at least on our platform, we have not provided moratorium to any of the borrowers. I am not aware of the practices being followed by other P2P platforms, but I believe some of them platforms are providing a moratorium as such. Having said that, we should also understand that even if we are not providing the moratorium and we are following if the borrower, if the people don't have the income source currently, as most of the shop owners and other people have the shops closed as such, they are not able to pay the money right now. And maybe the only advantage we will have is when the shops open, probably whatever the cash flow they have, they will use it to repay to the P2P platform, because there is no moratorium there, and they will continue to have moratorium from other players.
So Sanjay, I would like to add something to what Surinder has said. We here has to differentiate between a willful defaulter and a cash flow driven delayed in the payment.
Correct.
So considering one question you asked, what is the default risk, and what Surinder said, just to add to that, on an average on our platform for last 2 years, the average default rate was something around 2%. And the average return Surinder earlier told is 15 to 18% post delinquencies. As of the moment when we are reviewing, if some borrowers are not paying, we are reviewing from the point of view of the willful defaulter and the delay in the payment because of cash flow issues. So most of the people are falling in the second category.
I think this addresses most of the query. And yeah, one more query was there about the revenue model of P2P. I'm not sure whether it has been covered or not. How does the P2P company survive? What is the revenue model? How do we make money?
So we charge the fees from both the borrower and the lender to provide our services, and that is primarily the revenue model for us as such.
So I think we have covered all the query, and if there are any query from the participants, they can raise their hands and we will allow them to. Mr. Manish, can you see some other queries are there? Yes.
Yeah, so I think someone, whether we have covered them all, but anybody whose query has not been answered can ask this question again if that's okay.
I'm unmuting Mr. Ashok. So Mr. Ashok has been. I'm not able to unmute. Yeah, Mr. Ashok, I've unmuted, sir.
I'm able to hear. Maybe I have put on the mic also.
Right.
Anyway, hi.
How are you? Yeah, good.
Good. Sir, I just wanted to check how much of the process has been automated and how much is still being done manually. When we say contactless and all that, are we able to do that, like KYC and all that? And how do you assess the risk? You go to the CIBIL score and all, or there is some other mechanism which you adopt?
Okay. So the process including the KYC process was quite digital till the time there were no intervention by Supreme Court and Aadhaar was allowed for the KYC as such. However, after the Supreme Court ban on using of the Aadhaar number, the KYC process again was challenging and to some extent was non-digital. But now RBI again come out with the guideline and it's allowing the video KYC for that. And I think most of the digital lenders are implementing that. And so again, it will go totally contactless digital as such. The other thing was in terms of collection part, where because of the Aadhaar, we started with the eNACH, which was digitally signed using the Aadhaar database. After the Supreme Court ban on the Aadhaar use, again it went into physical mode. Now NPCI has again launched that eNACH, and also they have come out with some alternative for that Aadhaar-based eNACH. And most of the people are implementing that also. So I think end to end, except for the recovery part, which has to be physical when you have to go to the person's place to pursue him for the money. I think except for that part, most of it is now fully digital and contactless, including the credit algorithm, which was always, I think, for most of the players, it was always contactless and digital as such, because there is an algorithm which everyone has developed on their own, which throws out the bad application at various stages of the algorithm.
How about document signing?
So we are getting the document signed using the e-sign, which is allowed, which is the Aadhaar OTP-based e-sign. So we are getting the loan agreement signed between the borrower from the borrower using the e-sign.
But lender is not signing the agreement.
No, we are not asking the lenders to sign the agreement.
Okay, because anyway you have to proceed against the borrower in case he defaults.
Yes, absolutely.
But in that signing of document, Aadhaar is allowed to be used.
Yes, that is still allowed. That was still allowed. We could not capture the Aadhaar number. So Aadhaar number is being inputted by the borrower only directly on the e-sign web page. And from there, the OTP comes and he signs the agreement.
See, I just opened an account with the bank recently, and there they didn't say anything. They said, okay, go to online, put Aadhaar, and then you will get an OTP. Put that, and then everything was captured from Aadhaar.
Yeah. So Supreme Court order was excluding certain entities, which was the banks. They are allowed to use the Aadhaar, but they are not allowed. And if you know, now recently they have allowed the insurance companies also to use Aadhaar.
Okay.
But still, the non-banking finance companies like us, we are not allowed to use Aadhaar.
Okay, but otherwise, when we are doing this bank to bank, then why KYC is needed?
Yes.
So maybe the bank which has opened the account for the borrower or the lender, they already done KYC. Can we not rely on that?
So, unfortunately, we have to go by what the RBI guidelines is. So RBI mandates that we do the KYC for our customer assets, and obviously they have also come out with the CKYC, which is a platform where you can check the KYC of the other players. So once I do a KYC for any customer, I also upload it on the CKYC and match whether the data provided to me is matching with the already existing data or not.
Okay. So
Thank you, Mr. Ashok. Thank you, sir. We are short of time. So one more query which has come from Mr. Deepak Jain. He is trying to understand that do we do field investigation for the borrowers, and how do we do collection in case of default? Two parts.
Okay.
Field investigation for borrowers, and what do you do in case of default?
See, field investigation for the borrower is again a function of the credit risk that you are taking. So for example, suppose you are giving a loan of 2,000 rupees to someone, maybe the field investigation not is a viable option. Right? But if you are giving a loan of 2 lakh rupees to someone, maybe you can think of field investigation as such. Again, various lending institutions will have a different policy for the field investigation. So someone might also say that if he is having a CIBIL score of say whatever XYZ, then I don't need the field investigation. If he has a score of less than that, then I need a field investigation. It's a question of various lending institutions' internal policy, whether the field investigation, there is no regulatory requirement as such.
Okay.
On our platform, since we are more or less largely we are providing a loan which are of a slightly higher ticket size, which is 2 lakh to 2 lakh, 3 lakh rupees kind of a thing. We insist on the field investigation for each and every borrower in our case. And as far as collections are concerned, as I said, we follow the RBI guidelines which are there for the collection, and therefore, if the collection is not coming through the e-NACH on the due date, we do follow up with the customer. Our contact center people follow up the customer, do the SMS, and before the due date also we do send the reminder SMSs and mails to customer so that his account is funded on time. After that, if it doesn't happen, then we do have our own people who then follow up with the customer, reaching out to his home and reaching out to his workplace, talking to him. And if all these things don't work, then obviously we do take the legal recourse and file the 138 cases.
So what is the query from Soumya Agrawal? What is the cutoff CIBIL score for the borrowers?
Now again, it will depend on the platform to platform, lending institution to lending institution as such. On our platform, we have a CIBIL score of 700 as a minimum cutoff.
But Sanjay, one point I would like to add to Surinder that CIBIL score alone is not the criteria for our platform. Many of the people having CIBIL score of 750 and 800 we have rejected because there are other more than 200 critical parameters on which we evaluate the borrowers, and then whether the CIBIL score is falling or uprising, that also is equally important. So the customer get passed not only on the CIBIL score, which is very easy for any of the NBFC to assess. He has to pass through more than 200 other criteria, and which are subjective as well as objective. Only after passing through that and having a CIBIL score of 700, we get him approved.
And the legal cases are filed by you or by the lender, or do you file on behalf of the lender? Query from Mr.
All collection and recovery, we provide all the assistance. As of the moment, up to 138 filing, we are taking everything of our own. And beyond that, also we have the advocates on panel listed with us who take care of everything. So we assist.
138 notice is signed by, is sent by the company, or you send it on behalf of the lender?
It is sent by the platform. We take the authorization from the lender while they invest the money in the borrower. Okay. It is being sent by the platform so that the lender is not bothered on day-to-day basis. And all efforts are being placed by the platform only so that lender can be little more peaceful while collection and recovery happen.
Recovery, so I think there are queries which are coming linked to that. Recovery cost, who bears?
Up to the, as of the moment, so these are variable. Whatever we talk today may not exist tomorrow because these are the commercial aspects of the transactions on the platform. But what is the situation today? All the cost up to filing of 138 notice, the platform bears. Beyond that, we assist the lender in all probable ways, but the cost is being borne by the lender.
So I think
such situations are very less. I think only 2 situations which we are facing in last 2 years, not more. We take much more precaution while selecting the borrowers to avoid those situations. But then it's a business of lending. Such situations are occasionally bound to come.
I think one last question we should take, because this is very important from the lender's perspective. Soumya Agrawal is asking that we are not doing moratorium. However, the repayments are not coming due to lack of cash flow. So why should an investor invest today, considering repayments are not coming timely?
See, as is true for all the other lending institution also. So today, when we receive the application, we have tightened our criteria also in terms of whom to lend or not lend. And we do go through the bank statement, which is a mandatory requirement for any borrower to take money from our platform. Just to submit his bank statement. If we don't see the cash flow into that bank statement, then obviously we are not listing him currently. And if we see the customer is having enough cash flows to service the new loan that he is asking for now in this situation also, we do list the borrower, and therefore there should not be any concern in investing into that borrower.
So basically, we are saying that it is a risk appetite of the lender at a particular point of time, and accordingly, they have to take an informed call.
Yes.
Right. So there are no more queries. I would like Mr. Manish, if you want to have anything, we can take up.
Yeah, I think there are some queries on the YouTube also. If you can.
Yes.
See,
No. There are minor queries. I think they have been considered. So it's already now 7:30.
Okay.
We are 1 hour and 30 minutes into this. I would like to thank all the participants for joining, the esteemed speaker, the panelist, Mr. Manish Baid, Mr. Manoj Agrawal, Mr. Pramod Akramkar, Surendra Jalan. So on behalf of India Finance Forum, I would like to thank everybody for participating in this webinar, and we are sure that people have benefited. If still there are some query, Mr. Pramod or Mr. Surendra Jalan, you can give some contact number whom the participants can connect to in case of any query or they want to connect with your platform. So if you can share that.
Okay, so I will be happy to answer any query which is not being answered here, or if you have anything which comes as the afterthought, you can write directly to me. My email ID is surendra.jalan@omlp2p.com, or you can also contact me over my mobile number, which is 98673 44094.
You kindly tell me. I will write it down. 98.
So you please write it down.
98673
673
44
44
094.
094. Yes.
Yeah, and my email ID is surendra.jalan@omlp2p.com.
omlp2p.com. Right. So we have shared these details, and we are sure that this P2P platform will grow, and the aspiration of the P2P platform to coexist with the banker, to give support to the borrowers, those who are in the last line, who are not being able to service by the banking sector or a very formal sector, they will be able to use this digital platform to meet their unmet demand. So thank you everybody once again, and with this we close this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
everyone.
much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, Sanjay sir.
Haji?
Yeah, hi sir. I am Pratik Bindal here. I just want to know one thing. Like, I have one question regarding about the valuation of the fintech company. Like, what generally like the private equity firms looking at the valuation? What multiples they are looking for the valuation of the fintech?
So let this be responded by Mr. Manish Baid.
Pratik, I think valuation models are multiple, and right now I think the only valuation model that will work is asset under management, and possibly also about revenue, net revenue margin that they are able to make, that which is in some margin that is there in this space. So typically, again, right now multiples are varying because it also depends on the growth potential of the company, and different fintech companies, P2P companies are at different level of growth. So the valuation is a function of growth, and therefore the multiples will vary significantly. And the past transaction, if you look at, even companies, they have got at a very, very different multiple as compared to previously. Also, the multiples keep growing, keep going down as you keep growing, because the growth potential comes down as the base increases. So to that extent, that number is variable, but yes, it is more or less being valued based on revenue multiples at this point of time.
And just want to confirm, like into the banking sector, we are usually using the dividend discount model for that. And in the fintech, can we do the DCF as well? Because I think the DCF is not properly applicable on the fintech company. DCF is not right approach into fintech, no?
Ultimately, if you look at the end of it, whatever multiple or whatever ratio you take, at the end of the day, you're depending on some form that, okay, it will generate some amount of cash flow in the future. And the question always in DCF is that, these models right now are so small that you are looking at 10 years, 15 years down the road, how much value can be created, and then discounting it practically. So really speaking, it is still a multiple and still a discounted cash flow, but it's very difficult to use the discounted cash flow in arithmetical terms, the way we value. And therefore, you use these methods of revenue multiples, because very difficult to, even defend the discounted cash flow at this point of time in this industry. So that is why more of comparative figures are used as a valuation model and not purely as a discounted cash flow.
I think, see, Mr. Pratik, taking discounted cash flow at this stage as a benchmark to do the valuation will be too premature. The industry has not matured, and there still a lot of development has to be done. And so, to my understanding, valuation of a P2P firm will be more complex than a mere Excel projections, because the trend has not emerged.
Yes.
So it will depend upon what investment has been done by the investor, the taxation level. So larger perspective has to be taken. Once the industry matures, you know that it is solid business case and the industry will grow, then you can go on the EBITDA multiple or revenue multiple, but not at this juncture.
And just want to know one thing, the last question from my side. What is the average revenue multiple? Like it's talking about the Q1 2020. So usually like the said that 22.9 of a million acquisition has done, the merger acquisition has done in across 355 transaction deals. So what is the average revenue multiple for that the trading transaction is talking about? If you have any figure about that.
Only Manish or Manoj can
number. Yeah, so I think that number is not, we will have to do the number once again and see all the transactions, arrive at the average number right now. But, right now, what we have seen mostly in this segment is the valuation of revenue multiple has varied from 10 times of revenue to 30, 40 times of revenue. That is what we have seen as a range of valuation in different transactions.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So thanks everybody. I think we have got around 31 participants who are still there. So thanks for joining us, and wish you a happy weekend during COVID. Please spend time, stay safe.
And sir, I have one more question. It's a good opportunity for me to discuss about this. There is one typical ratio, like the total available market divided by service available market.
Kindly your name, please.
My name is Pratik Bindal.
Okay, Pratik. Last question, please.
Yeah, last question is basically there is one typical multiple, like the total available market divided by the serviceable available market. So if we're talking about a particular fintech, so we can look into like which segment they are particular in, specific into the fintech, which the target they focus on. So how do we like figure it out, the potential total available market and the serviceable available market?
Total available market for a fintech is the entire borrowing market in India, which is about 150 lakh crores. So the entire market is available, but serviceable one has to estimate based on different data points that are available in the economy. And if you look at the even RBI data, there would be a lot of data points that are available. Plus, when you do a available market and serviceable market, you also have to make predictions in the sense that how the market will grow as new players come in, including the P2P players. That is a matter of detailing, and I don't think that it's easy to answer that straight away. It's
Yes,
a
yes.
matter of crunching the numbers, trying to arrive at this.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. Thanks a lot to meeting here.
So I think we can now close the meeting with thanks and
Yeah.
gratitude to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Happy
Thanks
weekend to you
for
all.
giving this opportunity. Thanks. Bye.